I never imagined my wedding anniversary would turn into the most humiliating night of my life. We were seated at a long table in the middle of a crowded restaurant in Manhattan. The place was alive with clinking glasses, polite laughter, and the low hum of conversations from tables all around us. To anyone watching, it probably looked like a celebration, but I could already feel the storm coming. My wife, Marina, sat beside me in her emerald dress, a diamond pendant catching the glow of the chandelier. Across from us were her closest friends, women she had known since college. Beside each of them sat their husbands, men in tailored suits, the kind who tossed their car keys onto the table without thinking twice. I saw the Tesla logos flashing back at me, a silent reminder of the gap between their world and mine. Marina leaned back in her chair, twirling the stem of her wine glass between her fingers. Her friends had been talking about trips to Paris and the newest electric cars their husbands had purchased. I stayed quiet, trying to focus on the meal in front of me, but Marina's voice cut through the air, sharp and mocking. "You know," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "while your husbands are out closing deals and driving Teslas, mine is busy scrubbing toilets in Manhattan." The laughter from the table was hesitant, but Marina's smile widened as if she enjoyed twisting the knife. My chest tightened. I could feel my face heating, but I forced myself to sit still. I told myself it was just her way of joking, but I knew the truth. She meant every word. I tried to glance away, pretending to be absorbed by the candle flickering between us, but then Marina rose to her feet. She lifted her glass high, her eyes gleaming with something I had never seen before, cold satisfaction. "To new beginnings," she declared. "I want a divorce." The room froze. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Conversations at nearby tables died mid-sentence. Marina's voice carried with a cruel clarity as she continued. "I've had enough of living with a janitor. I deserve a man who can give me the life I want. Someone rich, someone who belongs at my side." My throat went dry. I searched her face, looking for a trace of hesitation, some sign that this was a cruel joke, but she only smirked as her friends whispered and exchanged glances across the table. I pushed my chair back. The legs screeched against the polished floor, breaking the silence. I could not speak. My voice was trapped beneath the weight of humiliation pressing down on me. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the restaurant. As the heavy doors swung shut behind me, the cold night air hit my face. I had never felt smaller. I had never felt more betrayed. I was not born with wealth or privilege. My name is Darius Cole, and for the past several years I have worked as a janitor in New York City. Every morning, I put on my uniform, lace up my work boots, and step into the steel and glass towers that scrape the sky. I sweep marble floors, polish chrome railings, and mop away the footprints of men in tailored suits who barely notice me as they pass by. To most people I am invisible, but to me, my work is a badge of honor. It is proof that I can stand on my own 2 feet and provide for my family without stealing, without lying, and without depending on anyone else. The job is not glamorous, but I take pride in it. My hands are rough, my back is sore most nights, yet there is a certain dignity in seeing the floors shine because of my effort. When I watch my reflection on a spotless surface that I cleaned, I remind myself that value is not found in titles or paychecks. It is found in the willingness to keep going when life is hard. Still, I would be lying if I said Marina ever saw it that way. From the moment we moved to New York, she made it clear that the life I was building was not enough for her. She was drawn to the glittering storefronts on Fifth Avenue, the electric cars gliding silently down the avenues, the penthouses perched high above the city lights. She measured happiness in status symbols and luxury, while I measured it in honesty, family, and the quiet pride of knowing I never cut corners. At first, I tried to bridge the gap. I picked up extra shifts so she could shop for the clothes she wanted. I skipped meals to save for small vacations. I told myself that love was about compromise, that if I worked harder, she would see the man behind the uniform and not just the paycheck. But the harder I tried, the further she drifted. She stopped seeing me as her partner and began seeing me as the weight holding her back. What made the rejection sharper was the family I came from. My father, Henrik Cole, built his name in business long before I was born. He was a man who believed in legacy and control. He expected his son to follow his path, to inherit the empire he spent decades creating. But I was young, stubborn, and determined to make my own way. When I refused to step into his world, he told me I was throwing away a destiny most men would kill for. Our last conversation ended with me slamming a door, and for years we never spoke again. My mother, Elena, was the opposite of Henrik in every way. She was gentle, patient, and endlessly encouraging. She taught me that money can vanish in a blink, but character endures forever. When Marina mocked me, when the world seemed eager to remind me that I was just a janitor, I would think of her voice. "Darius," she used to say, "it does not matter if your shoes are worn thin. What matters is that you are walking on a path you can be proud of." My sister, Talia, is much younger than I am. She grew up watching me take the hits life threw my way, and she admired me for it. In her eyes, I was a protector, someone who proved that you could stand tall without bending to the pressure of others. She would call me between her college classes, telling me she bragged about me to her friends. I never told her how much that meant, but those words kept me steady more times than she will ever know. And then there was my grandfather, Merrick. He was a man of stories, a voice of wisdom that carried through generations. He used to sit me on the porch when I was a boy and tell me about his own struggles during the war, about the years he spent with nothing but the clothes on his back and a determination to survive. "Hardship shapes a man, Darius," he would say, "but it is how you carry yourself through it that determines who you become." His words never left me, and in many ways they built the backbone that Marina could never see. That night at the restaurant, when Marina raised her glass and stripped me of my dignity in front of strangers, the pain cut deep, but it was not new. It was the culmination of years of small cuts, the quiet disdain in her eyes when she looked at me in my uniform, the sighs she gave when the rent check drained our savings, the comparisons she made between me and her friends' husbands. Each moment had chipped away at the bond we once had until there was nothing left but contempt. I walked into that dinner already carrying the weight of her disappointment. My hands were calloused, my shirt smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals, and my back ached from hours of scrubbing. Still, I told myself it was worth it because this was our anniversary. I hoped, foolishly, that maybe tonight she would look past the uniform and see the man who loved her, the man who had sacrificed sleep and comfort to keep food on our table. Instead, she chose, that night of all nights, to announce to the world that she was done with me. The restaurant smelled of roasted garlic and fine wine, but I could barely taste the food in front of me. Marina's friends were dressed in designer gowns, their jewelry catching the soft glow of the chandeliers. Their husbands sat tall in their suits, their Rolex watches glinting every time they lifted a glass. I sat among them in a shirt I had ironed 3 times to look sharp, but I still felt out of place. I tried to focus on the meal, to keep the peace for the sake of our anniversary, but Marina made it impossible. She was radiant in her emerald dress, but her beauty carried an edge sharpened by contempt. She leaned toward her friends with a smile that was too wide, too eager to impress. Every time the conversation turned toward luxury cars, vacations, or high-paying careers, I felt her eyes flick toward me with an unspoken message. "You are not enough." Her friend Leona bragged about her husband's new Tesla, describing how the doors lifted like wings. The table erupted in admiration. Marina did not miss her chance. She tilted her glass toward me and said, "Meanwhile, my husband gets his cardio mopping floors." "Who needs a Tesla when you have a mop bucket?" Laughter rippled across the table. It was not loud, but it was enough. My stomach twisted. I forced myself to swallow the rising anger, reminding myself that anger would only make it worse. I clenched my hands under the table and told myself to endure. I thought about saying something, but my voice caught in my throat. The pride I carried in my work, the lessons my mother and grandfather taught me, the resilience I built over years of labor, all of it shrank under her words. For Marina, it was not enough. I tried to change the subject. I leaned forward and said, "I had a tenant thank me today for helping her carry groceries up the stairs. Made my day, I meant it as a reminder that small acts matter, but Marina rolled her eyes. Groceries? Darius, please. These men are negotiating contracts and managing portfolios. You're bragging about carrying a grocery bag." Her friends smiled politely, but the damage was done. My attempt to restore dignity only fueled her disdain. As the plates were cleared, Marina lifted her glass. I expected her to toast to our anniversary, maybe acknowledge the years we had spent together. Instead, she turned the evening into my trial. "To new beginnings," she said, her voice rising above the clink of silverware. Her eyes swept across the table before landing on me. "I want a divorce." The words cut through me like glass. At first, I thought I misheard her. The table fell silent. Even the servers froze in place. My heart pounded against my ribs, loud in my ears. She went on, her voice steady and cruel. "I am tired of living with a janitor. I deserve a man who can give me the life I want. Someone rich, someone who belongs at my side." The room blurred. I saw her friends shifting uncomfortably in their seats, husbands looking anywhere but at me. My chair suddenly felt too small, my body too heavy. Humiliation burned in my chest, a fire I could not put out. I wanted to speak, to defend myself, but my mouth refused to move. My pride was trapped under the weight of her words. I thought of my sister Talia, who looked up to me as her protector. I thought of my mother Elena, who told me dignity mattered more than wealth. I thought of my grandfather Merrick, who believed hardship revealed character. All of them had given me strength, but in that moment their lessons clashed with the raw sting of public shame. I pushed my chair back. The sound of its legs scraping against the polished floor pierced the silence. My heart ached, but my decision was clear. Staying at that table meant surrendering what little dignity I had left. I stood without a word. Marina smirked, raising her glass higher, as if my silence proved her point. Her friends whispered, their eyes darting between us. I turned my back on the table and walked toward the door. Each step was heavy but necessary. The maitre d' tried to greet me politely as I left, but I could not meet his eyes. The restaurant doors swung open, and the cold night air of New York struck me like a slap. I stood on the sidewalk, my breath visible in the chill inside. Laughter slowly resumed, muffled by the glass. I stared at the lights of passing cars, feeling smaller than I ever had in my life. This was supposed to be our anniversary, a night to celebrate the years we had spent together. Instead, it became the night she announced my failure to the world. In that moment, I was not Darius the husband, the brother, the son, or the grandson. I was just the man Marina had reduced to a punchline. The city roared around me with taxis honking and voices rising from the streets, but all I heard was her voice echoing in my head. I deserve a man who can give me the life I want. The cold air bit at my skin as I stood outside the restaurant, trying to steady my breathing. The humiliation from inside still clung to me like a second skin. People passed by without a second glance, couples arm in arm, laughing and hailing taxis, while I stood frozen under the city lights. My hands trembled, though not from the chill. I had left my dignity behind at that table, ripped away in front of strangers and so-called friends. I shoved my hands into my pockets and started walking. I did not know where I was going, maybe home, maybe nowhere at all. The sidewalk was slick from an earlier rain, and the reflections of neon signs shimmered in puddles like broken pieces of glass. My mind replayed Marina's words again and again. I deserve a man who can give me the life I want. Each time, the pain struck harder, as though she were repeating them into my ear with every step I took. Half a block away, I leaned against a lamp-post and lowered my head. For a moment, I wanted to disappear, to dissolve into the concrete and never face the world again. That was when I heard it, the low hum of an engine pulling up beside me. A sleek, black car slowed to a stop. Its tinted window rolled down with deliberate slowness. Inside, a man in a dark suit leaned forward, his face stern, his eyes sharp as if they were measuring me. "Mr. Cole?" he asked, his voice deep and steady. I froze. My first thought was that Marina had sent someone to mock me further, to drive the knife deeper. I hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, who's asking?" The man gave a small smile that did not reach his eyes. "Your father sent me." The words hit harder than Marina's insults. My father, Henrik Cole. A name I had not spoken in years, a man I had buried in silence because the pain of his disappointment weighed heavier than any insult my wife could throw. "What do you mean my father sent you?" I asked, suspicion dripping from my voice. "I have not heard from him in years." The man reached into the passenger seat and pulled out a thick envelope sealed with red wax. He held it out the window with a steady hand. "Your father told me to deliver this when the time was right. Tonight," he said, "is the time." I stared at the envelope, my heart racing. My father's seal was unmistakable. A lion's head pressed into the wax, a symbol he had used on everything from his business contracts to birthday cards when I was a boy. I had not seen that seal since the night I walked away from him. I did not move at first. Part of me wanted to reject it, to tell the man he had the wrong person, to turn and keep walking. But curiosity gnawed at me. Slowly, I reached out and took the envelope from his hand. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind used by men who wanted to leave an impression. "What is this?" I asked, my voice unsteady. The man's gaze never wavered. "It is your father's message." His exact words were, "Tell my son it is time." The window slid up before I could ask more, and the car pulled away, its tires whispering against the wet pavement. Within seconds it vanished into the blur of traffic, leaving me alone with the envelope clutched in my hands. I stood frozen under the streetlight, the sounds of the city around me fading into the background. My breath came in short bursts as I stared at the seal. Memories of my father surged like a flood, his stern voice teaching me about balance sheets, the sharp arguments when I refused to follow in his footsteps, the last look of disappointment in his eyes before I walked out for good. I had not heard from him since. Not on birthdays, not on holidays, not even when my mother pleaded for us to reconcile. I convinced myself he had cast me out forever. And now, after years of silence, a stranger in a black car was telling me he had been waiting for the right time to send me a message. I pressed my thumb against the wax seal, but I hesitated. Part of me was afraid of what I would find inside. Was it another lecture, a final insult from a man who believed I had wasted my potential? Or was it something else, something heavier, something I was not ready to face? I finally broke the seal and pulled out a folded letter. My hands shook as I opened it, and the first line made my knees weaken. "Darius, my son. If you are reading this, it means the day I have been waiting for has arrived. You have endured hardship and humiliation, but you have not broken. You have carried yourself with dignity, even when the world mocked you. Now it is time to step into the role I always knew you were meant to claim." I read the words over and over, my throat tightening. For years I believed my father had abandoned me, but here he was, speaking to me from the page as though he had been watching all along. At the bottom of the envelope was a set of brass keys, old and heavy, with tags that bore numbers and addresses. I turned them in my hand, the metal cool against my palm, my reflection caught in their shine. My father's words echoed in my head. "It is time." I stood in the street with the letter in one hand and the keys in the other, torn between anger at his silence and the sudden rush of hope that maybe, just maybe, I had been wrong about him all these years. The betrayal of my wife had broken me minutes before, but now another door was opening, one I never expected. I stood beneath the streetlight with the letter trembling in my hands and the brass keys heavy in my pocket. The city roared around me, but I heard none of it. All I could hear was my father's voice in the words he had written. It was as if he were standing beside me, steady and commanding, yet distant as he had always been. For years I had carried anger toward him. I believed he had abandoned me when I refused to follow in his footsteps, when I chose a life of independence over his empire. I convinced myself he wanted nothing to do with me, that I was no longer his son in his eyes. But now, staring at this letter, that belief began to crack. The words were not of rejection. They were of faith. You have endured hardship and humiliation, but you have not broken. You have carried yourself with dignity, even when the world mocked you. Tears threatened to rise, but I forced them back. I walked toward a bench on the corner and sat down, unfolding the rest of the letter. My father's handwriting was sharp and deliberate, every stroke of the pen carrying authority. Darius, you thought I turned my back on you. The truth is, I was watching. I needed to know if you could survive without leaning on me. I needed to see if you would build strength on your own. Only a man who has tasted struggle can be trusted with legacy. I withheld my hand, not out of hatred, but out of faith that you would prove yourself worthy. Tonight you have. The keys enclosed belong to properties, accounts, and businesses that are now yours. They will test you. They will demand everything of you. But they will also give you the chance to rise above the humiliation you endured and become the man I always believed you could be. I set the letter on my lap and stared at the keys. Dozens of memories rushed through me. The long nights scrubbing floors, the mornings where exhaustion made my hands shake, the shame of watching Marina measure me against men who had everything I did not. My father had seen all of it, and instead of rescuing me, he had allowed me to carry the weight. And now, when I felt at my lowest, he had placed the burden and the blessing of his legacy into my hands. I clenched the keys tightly, the metal biting into my palm. A surge of emotion coursed through me. Anger at his silence, gratitude for his belief, and an overwhelming sense of vindication. For years, Marina treated me like a failure, as though my worth was tied to the shine of a car emblem or the number of zeros in a bank account. Now, by sheer twist of fate, I stood holding proof that I was far more than she ever imagined. Yet, what struck me most was not the wealth itself. It was the realization that my father had not abandoned me after all. He had been waiting for this moment, and in his eyes I had passed the test. I rose from the bench, my grip on the keys firm. The city around me no longer felt cold and indifferent. The lights seemed brighter, the night air sharper, alive with possibility. A taxi slowed as if sensing my need for direction, and I stepped inside. The driver asked, "Where to?" I unfolded a small tag attached to one of the keys. It bore an address in the Upper East Side. My heart raced as I gave the driver the location. When we arrived, I stepped out onto a quiet street lined with brownstones. The key slid smoothly into the lock of a wrought iron gate. Inside was a townhouse, grand but not ostentatious, its windows glowing warmly against the night. My father had left this for me, not as a gift, but as a responsibility. I walked through the rooms in awe. Polished wooden floors, shelves lined with books on business, finance, and history, paintings that spoke of wealth and careful taste. It felt both foreign and familiar, like stepping into a piece of the life I had once rejected. On the dining table sat another envelope with my name written across it. I opened it and found a second letter, shorter but even more direct. "Darius, this is only the beginning. What you do next will define you. Do not let betrayal chain you to bitterness. Rise above it. Prove that integrity can rule as powerfully as ambition. I am watching, even if from afar. Henrik." My legs weakened, and I sank into a chair. The weight of everything pressed down on me. The betrayal of my wife, the years of labor, the silence of my father, And now this sudden inheritance that changed everything. Yet beneath the weight was a rising strength, a conviction I had not felt before. I thought of Marina sitting at that restaurant table, smug and triumphant as she announced our end. She believed she had shattered me, but tonight was not my end. It was my beginning. When the clock struck midnight, I stood at the window, looking out at the city that had once seemed so indifferent. For the first time in years, I felt taller than the skyscrapers themselves. The janitor who had been mocked and discarded was gone, a man with the weight of legacy, the keys to power, and the fire of resilience now stood in his place. And though my father's voice was only ink on paper, I could hear him clearly. It is time. The morning after that night felt different. I woke in the townhouse my father had left for me, surrounded by silence and the weight of everything that had happened. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting warm patterns across the polished floor. For years I had lived in small apartments with thin walls and cramped rooms. Now I stood in a place that represented power, legacy, and a future I had never imagined. I brewed coffee in the kitchen, my hands steady for the first time in months. The bitterness of humiliation from the restaurant was still there, but it no longer consumed me. Instead, it fueled me. I thought about Marina's smirk, her laughter, the way she had raised her glass to my ruin. She wanted to crush me that night, to leave me broken. Instead, she lit the fire that would carry me forward. By noon, my phone buzzed with a call from her. I stared at the screen, her name glowing back at me. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but another part wanted to hear her voice now that the ground beneath us had shifted. I answered. "Darius," she said, her tone softer than I had heard in years. "I was upset last night. I didn't mean to humiliate you like that." I said nothing. I let the silence stretch until she rushed to fill it. "I heard something this morning. About you, about Henrik." She paused as if choosing her words carefully. "I didn't know your father was still connected to you. I didn't know you were heir to anything." Her words were cautious, but her intent was clear. The woman who had dismissed me as worthless now wanted to reel me back in. "Marina," I said firmly, "you did mean it. You wanted me to feel small. You wanted to cut me down in front of everyone because you measured me against your friends' husbands. And I came up short, but you were wrong. I was never small. I just chose a harder path." She tried to interrupt, but I raised my voice. "You wanted wealth, and now you see it standing in front of you. But you lost me the moment you traded loyalty for greed." Her tone shifted, pleading now. "We can start over, Darius. We can be better. You can forgive me. Think about everything we've shared." I shook my head, though she could not see me. "No, you wanted a man who could buy your happiness. Go find him. I hope he brings you all the Teslas in the world, because what I have now is more than wealth. I have dignity, and that is something you never valued." I ended the call and let the silence of the townhouse embrace me. It was not triumph I felt, but clarity. Marina had shown me who she was, and my father had reminded me who I was. Over the next few weeks, I stepped into the legacy my father left. I visited properties with my name on the deeds. I met with business partners who had known Henrik for decades. They looked at me with surprise at first, unsure if the janitor's son could stand where Henrik once did. But as I spoke with conviction and carried myself with the strength of my struggle, I saw their respect grow. Each day I walked into those meetings, I thought of the floors I once scrubbed, the janitor's cart I once pushed. I carried those memories with pride, not shame. They had shaped me into the man I was, the man who could shoulder responsibility without losing his integrity. And every night when I returned to the townhouse, I would take out my father's letter and read it again. His words reminded me that this was not a gift handed freely. It was a trust, a challenge, a chance to prove that character mattered more than titles. Months later, I passed the restaurant where Marina ended our marriage. I stopped across the street and watched through the window as couples laughed and raised glasses in celebration. The pain of that night was still there, but it no longer owned me. Instead, it had become part of the story that shaped me. I smiled and walked away, not as the man who was humiliated, but as the man who rose from it. The lesson is simple. You are not defined by the insults of others or the weight of their expectations. You are defined by how you carry yourself when life knocks you down. Dignity, resilience, and loyalty are worth more than any car, any suit, or any fleeting status symbol. I lost a wife who never truly valued me, but I gained something far greater: clarity, strength, and a legacy built not on appearances but on endurance. And if my story reminds you of anything, let it remind you of this: your worth is not measured by what others say you are. It is measured by the integrity you refuse to surrender. If this story moved you, if it made you think, or if it gave you strength, do me a favor. Like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and leave a comment below with your thoughts. I want to hear your stories too. And if you want more powerful stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps these stories alive.